It is my great honor to introduce Janneke Lewis, our keynote speaker for this afternoon. Janneke hails from South Africa, where she became a lawyer and prosecuted over 300 rape cases. In 1992, a year after she moved to Canada, Janneke joined SI of North and West Vancouver, and only 10 years after that, she was our Western Canada Region Governor from 2002 to 2004. She worked as a child protection social worker while requalifying as a lawyer in Canada and became a partner and senior lawyer at North Shore Law. During the 90s is when I first heard Janneke speak, and probably many of you as well, speak about human trafficking, and through the years have followed her and applauded her progress on the world stage. She represented Soroptimists International at numerous international conferences, hosting workshops, and also presented at UN conferences. In 2009, Janneke spearheaded a petition to the Canadian government requesting that we follow the Nordic model. Many of us Soroptimists were involved with sending hundreds of signatures onto Ottawa, and this effect resulted in Joy Smith, who was MP at the time in Kildonan, championing this cause through a private member's bill that enacted the Nordic model known as PSIPA here in Canada, and that stands for Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. While this bill was working its way through the Canadian government, Janneke moved to Scotland and became a member of SI Glasgow. She volunteered with Rhoda Grant to lobby and advocate there for the Nordic model laws, and was also a member of the cross-party human trafficking group. Does that sound familiar? We do have a joint party group here in Canada working on consensus of bills to protect particularly youth right now. Now that Janneke is back in Canada, she is continuing to share her passion for justice on human trafficking issues, and here make sure that the laws are enacted. Forgive me, Janneke, I'm going to try something in Afrikaans. Jy is baie goed. Please join me in a warm welcome to Janneke.
So, baie dankie, Janneke, and thank you for that warm welcome. I'm always amazed when I receive an introduction like that. I sort of look behind me to see if there's somebody else that they're talking about. But I really enjoy and passionate about this particular topic. I'm going to try and share the screen properly. There we go. So today I'm going to be talking about human trafficking, which is the topic that's on your agenda. But it's really the sexual exploitation part of it. And I'm going to tell you why prostitution and sexual exploitation is part of human trafficking. It's a piece that is often misunderstood. And I'm going to talk to you today about the problem that we still have. And yes, thank you, Janneke. The Western Canada region was amazing in 2009 when we did all this work. And I can't believe that in 2021, we're almost having to do it again. But I'm going to be also suggesting a proposal, a solution, because that's what Soroptimists do, in how we can solve the problem that I'm going to first tell you about. So, what is prostitution, trafficking for sexual purposes, and our law called PSIPA, or the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act? Some of you may know this already, but I'm going to assume no knowledge so that the whole proposal makes sense, shall we say. So prostitution involves the buying, the use of somebody's body for the purchase of sexual gratification. You're not buying the person, you're buying the use of their body, any part of their body, for the purchase of sexual gratification. There is a complete power imbalance. Obviously, the person with the buying power has control over the prostituted person. And I'm very cautious about calling them the prostituted person rather than a prostitute. A prostitute sounds like choice. It sounds like something that they've decided to do, and they can stop doing at any moment. And 90% of the time, that's not the case. So how do people come to be prostituted? There are many, many reasons, and I could probably spend an hour talking about it, which I'm not going to do. But generally, it's by coercion, by being trafficked, by being forced, by being lured into addiction, and by being sugar dating. These are just a few of the suggestions. Sugar dating is a relatively new term. It's where younger girls hook up with older men who wine and dine and treat them to a nice life, holidays, etc. And initially, the young girls naively think that the men are just doing it for their company, until they suddenly realize that it's not their company that they want, but they want to have a young, often underage young girl who is wowed by the bright lights and so on, and they end up in a different form of prostitution. Addiction, it's a chicken and egg question. Oftentimes, the trafficker will get the prostituted person into addiction so that they become a prostitute. There are playbooks on Amazon and other places, I suppose, but Amazon is where everybody buys everything, a playbook on how to be a pimp and how to prostitute a person. And the things that pimps look for are a person who's vulnerable, a young girl who's vulnerable, doesn't appear to have any friends, might be walking slightly unconfidently, might be low. The vulnerability could be for a couple of weeks, could be a short-term vulnerability. The pimp hones in on that, treats that young person well, exceptionally well, purchases things that they don't normally get, creates a boyfriend experience. This is the boyfriend of their choice. It couldn't be a nicer guy, until it becomes time for payback. And then suddenly it's like, well, what do you think? Why do you think I'm going to buy you these Louis Vuitton bags? And why don't you pay them? You have to pay them back. This isn't a free ride, And the way to do that is to have sex with my friends, and they'll pay us money for it, and so on and so forth. Trafficking is defined by the United Nations. This is back in 2000, and I'm thinking 1 or 2, as an act, a means, and a purpose. So you need those 3 things. So an act is the recruitment or transportation or transferring or harboring of a person. And the act could be, we often think of something like a Thai woman being brought to Australia or to another Western country, and there's this exotic sort of transportation from a poor country to a wealthy country, and yes, that does happen. But a person could be trafficked from Merritt to Calgary. I've become aware fairly recently of an enormous amount of trafficking in Duncan and Vancouver Island. There's trafficking up in Prince George, probably every province here. I'm just more focused in British Columbia myself with the information that I get through my work. The means can be force, or it can be deception, which is the opposite of force in a way. It's alluring. It looks like the person's going willingly. Or abuse of power. So somebody who's in a position of power, a police officer, a teacher, a priest, a parent. There's an amazing amount of interfamiliar trafficking. And the purpose could be a number of things. We're going to talk about sexual exploitation today, which is the prostituted person, but it could be for forced labor, slavery, removal of organs, adoption of babies, babies that aren't really given up, and so on. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I want to get to the issues that we're trying to resolve. So we're talking about that aspect of trafficking, which is about prostituted persons. And I say here, there are 3 legal models of dealing with prostitution. There really are 4. The one that I think everybody agrees doesn't work, and that's why we've not listed it here, is the complete criminalization of prostitution. That means you charge the pimp, you charge the John, you charge the prostituted person. I'm going to use prostitute woman and girl going forward because majority of them are, although I recognize that there are men as well, transgendered people. So, but just for ease, I think, again, the majority are women and girls. So everybody recognizes that by criminalizing the prostituted person, you're not going to help them. They're the victims, and you can't criminalize that aspect. Although my years as a prosecutor here in British Columbia, that's what we did initially, because it was the only way of removing the, especially teenage prostituted person, away from the pimp. We had no other resource to get that prostituted person away from a pimp, separate them, detox them. And if you think about it, it's horrific to detox somebody in a jail cell when they're 14, 15 years old. And I can tell you about the parents that have stood outside my office talking about trying to help their children by doing just that. It's a very bad and horrible choice. We need to do it better. The three legal models in dealing with prostitution are the legalization of it. I'm going to talk about these each individually. The full decriminalization of it, so nobody gets charged, and the Nordic model. So the legalization of it is, an example of that is Germany, Holland, a couple of other countries, where prostitution is completely legal. Prostitution is a job. You pay taxes on it. You get benefits for it. If you register, you can even get extended health care. Although the reality of it is that no extended health care service wants to give you health care because you're a high risk. Very, very few people have actually ended up registering. As a legalized society, the revenue in Germany is 14.6 billion euros. That's times 1.5, just for the conversion to Canadian dollars, per year. There are 3,500 registered brothels. What they found is that the prices of the services have dropped because there's the demand has increased, but so is the trafficking. Most of the women who are providing the service, so to speak, the prostitute women, are not German. They have been brought in from the Eastern European countries around Germany that are poor. The average cost of sexual intercourse in a brothel is about 30 euros. A woman has to pay 160 euros per day for the use of the room, and 25 euros per day tax. And she therefore has to provide services to 6 men just to start making some money. This is a chain of brothels. This is a mega brothel. It's a Paradise, you know, like you have the Golden Arches, McDonald's, and fast food chains. You've got Paradise, the brothel chain. It caters up to 1,000 men at a time, and there are about 1.2 million men in Germany buy sex every day. The numbers are staggering. Of course, it doesn't hold. Supposedly it doesn't hold such stigma in Germany anymore. It's considered normal. Women are trafficked from Eastern Europe. Practices are becoming more dangerous with less protection for the women. So the prices are going down. The acts that the women are expected to provide are more and more dangerous to their health. They have lots and lots of medical issues, prolapses. They end up often incontinent for the rest of their lives. They have throat issues. I don't want to go into what happens to them, but their medical issues are extreme. And of course, you haven't even counted any of the normal diseases that are transmitted. So basically, you can go into a mega brothel, a man can go into a mega brothel, and some of them, they have a cover charge of 70 euros, and you buy a pint, a pie, a woman, off you go. The next one is the full decriminalization model. This is known as the New Zealand model. It's often the one that's preferred by pimps and people that are trying to overturn any prostitution laws. And the reason that they're doing that is because this makes it completely decriminalized. The Johns don't get criminalized. There's no controls on them. There's no laws about them. At least with the legalization, there's some semblance of not restrictions, but there's a structure around it. Here, it's just completely decriminalized. It just doesn't feature. It's not a criminal act. Police aren't interested in it. The only people that you could go to are the labor board. So if you are a prostituted woman working in a brothel and they don't treat you well, you could go to the labor board, but I'm really not sure what that would look like. Go to the labor board and, well, you know, I had a couple of men and they didn't pay properly or they weren't very nice to me, and I'm not sure what that would look like to the tribunal hearing that. It hasn't been very successful for the women, that's for sure. But the pimps and Johns love this system. So before full decriminalization in New Zealand, women negotiated their own deals. Men accepted that they would say to a woman, you know, the woman could choose whether there was anal intercourse or no kissing, or whether they insisted on using condoms, and men paid the women for the act. And after the full decriminalization, the brothels set the prices fell. The men demanded all the other things that they hadn't been able to before, and they paid the brothel. So again, that's where it comes into the labor board. You know, hopefully the woman gets paid. She's an employee now. This model has failed to stop the prostitution of children, with Maori and Pacific Islander children being disproportionately represented in prostitution in New Zealand, many of them as trafficking victims. And here's something that one of the New Zealand community workers said. She says, at least the old law kept a lid on the numbers, but with no law on the streets, pimps and gangs have moved in. So in New Zealand, even though they say, well, it's not a crime, so you don't have to regulate it or anything, women are brought in, sometimes from the islands, from Samoa and other islands around the Pacific, and their passports are withheld by the brothel keeper. So basically, they back to trafficking. So the impact of legalization and full decriminalization is that in both of these cases, prostitution increases, sex trafficking increases to fill the extra demand because local women aren't choosing to be prostituted. There's less overview from the police, which means more illegal activity or uncontrolled activity. The pay and conditions for the women deteriorate, and it has an impact on the status of women. Now, in all of this, we must understand that prostitution is violence against women. There is no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Now, a lot of Johns and pimps will say, well, you know, it's a sex trade. Every time I hear global news going, the sex trade worker, they don't have a union. They shouldn't have a union. There's no better working conditions for a prostitute. Sex work is not work. And I'm going to go and just spend a little bit of time telling you why. First of all, experience has no value in prostitution. So in my job, most of your jobs, the more experienced you are, the better pay you get. In prostitution, a John will call the brothel and say, what's your youngest person? Do you have a new girl there? Do you have somebody who's a virgin? Somebody with no experience? That's who I want. And they hold the highest value. Actual labor is not necessary in prostitution. So a prostituted person can participate, of course, but could be drunk or drugged to the point of unconsciousness and still be prostituted. And oftentimes when a girl is being broken in, they are drugged or drunk to the point that they don't offer any resistance. The preconditions for free consent don't exist in prostitution. So there are three preconditions in order for there to be consent: the freedom to choose a sexual partner, the freedom to select the nature of the sexual activity, and the freedom to choose the timing. And in the case of a prostituted person, none of those freedoms exist. They are not free to choose any of those. Prostitution is not a task that you can add to your resume. You can't apply for a job and, between the years 2012 and 14, what were you doing, ma'am? I was prostituting myself, and then I cleaned myself up and I went and got a job. That's not going to look good on your resume. First of all, you may have a criminal record from it, but nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to put that on their resume, and it doesn't enhance your resume when you do it. No one wants their child to go into prostitution. Nobody sits at the school, job fair and says, "Well, you could become a teacher, a nurse, doctor, prostitute. What do you think?" And certainly nobody wants their child to be prostituted. Even those that have been prostituted, I've heard, spoken to them, and none of them want that for their child. Job centers don't send women to jobs as a prostitute. So often in countries, you have to demonstrate, in order to get your EI or the equivalent of EI, you have to demonstrate that you've accepted any available work through the job center. And even in New Zealand, they don't say, well, you can't get your EI because there is a job out there. It's actually up in the brothel up the street, and you could go and try there. And if they turn you down, come back and get your EI. That doesn't happen. It happened once in Germany in 2005, I believe, and there was such an outrage that that was stopped. There's no other job that requires a psychosocial rehabilitation. It is an incredibly stressful, hard experience for people to experience on their physical bodies, their emotional bodies. A lot of these prostituted women, I think 67 or 70%, have PTSD, and then all the other physical ailments that go along with it. And researchers are unwilling to try this out themselves. Usually researchers are willing to experience many things, but not this. So a lot of you in Western Canada, and I'm really proud of Western Canada, know what the Nordic model is. But for those of you who are new here, it decriminalizes all those who are prostituted, provides support services to them to help them exit, and makes buying people for sex a criminal offense. So the prostituted person is not criminalized. They don't run the risk of being charged or arrested by the police. The person with the money in their pocket buying the service will get criminalized, is at risk for being charged with a criminal offense. And of course, the pimp who is trafficking and bartering and selling a person is obviously also up for being charged. And the idea of this is that it helps the prostituted woman to exit without fear. They can go to the police if something is violent. They can go to the police if, even if they continue to work in the as a prostitute for a while, because obviously it doesn't stop automatically. They can go to the police and speak to them about it, and seek help to social workers, to anybody, and say, "I'm trying to get out. Help me." The Johns run the risk, and they need to know that they run the risk of being charged. This approach has been adopted by these 8 countries, mainly the Nordic countries, which is why it's the Nordic model, started in Sweden. And it is the most recent country, I think, was Ireland or Israel. So in order for it to be successful, we need full decriminalization of all those who are prostituted, in conjunction with the following: high quality services for those in prostitution. So this is a long-term a relationship that needs to be built with those people who are currently in prostitution. They need help getting off drugs. They need help training so they can do something else. They need help with their psychological situation, housing probably, all those types of things. Buying sex must be a criminal offense. Procuring, pimping, and sex trafficking legislation needs to be strengthened. And all factors that drive people into the prostitution need to be addressed. So all the things like poverty, any vulnerability, addictions, homelessness, all of those issues that make a person vulnerable, and it's not an exhaustive list, need to be addressed. There needs to be education programs in schools. There needs to be training for the police, prosecutors, judges, and frontline workers so that they can identify a trafficked person when they see it. There needs to be an understanding between with the police that a prostituted person is a trafficked person more often than not. They need to make that their default position rather than treating them as a bad girl, somebody who's gone off the rails. And oftentimes those who are in those types of positions would actually either mock or sometimes even use the prostitute themselves. This law must be prioritized. And I just want to say this, I have the utmost respect for the police, but unfortunately, too many times I've heard from prostituted people that they were further abused by the police. This is not the person speaking. This is a stock photo. Prostitution has this way of stealing all the dreams, goals, and beautiful essence out of a woman. During the survivor was 19 years in prostitution. During my years in it, I didn't meet one woman who enjoyed what she was doing. Everyone was trying to get out. And I hear that a lot. So in 2014, while I was actually in a cross-party meeting in Edinburgh, in Scotland, talking about trafficking and why the Nordic model was necessary, I was watching my phone at the same time, and it was literally while I was talking that I saw the announcement come through from Ottawa on December the 14th that, December the 1st, that the PASIPA was passed. PASIPA is Nordic model light, but it is the Nordic model. It creates an offense that prohibits the purchasing of sexual services or communicating for that purpose. It should actually be prohibits it prohibits the receiving material benefit derived from the commission of the offense, and it prohibits the advertising of sexual services, the back page of the Georgia Strait and things like that. It prohibits communication for selling sex services, and it ensures consistency between prostitution offenses and trafficking laws. That's the theory behind it all. And PASIPA does that to an extent. The government also announced that there'd be new funding of $20 million to support programming for those who wish to leave. All those services that I talked about that we need for the vulnerable people. It was $20 million was earmarked for that to be spent over 5 years. That's not a lot of money, to be fair, across Canada. But what we found is this. Many of the organizations that I've worked with, and I'm connected to an organization here in Vancouver, and I represent Soroptimists at that organization. It's a coalition. There are 38 organizations altogether in this coalition, all dealing with various aspects of prostitution, trafficking, and so on. Nobody has heard of that money being spent on any organization. So we're not sure where that 20 million has gone. We've also found out that the Act has not been implemented in all the jurisdictions in Canada. So the group that I'm in is in Vancouver, and they have done a lot of work with the Vancouver Police Department, and they've found out through meetings with the police chief, through the meetings with the head of the trafficking group or department, that the policy that they are using for prostituted persons and trafficking predates 2014. Now, if it predates 2014, it's clearly not the new law. And the attitude of the Vancouver police, they are making noises to us to say, oh yes, we want to change it, but they're really not. And the police on the street, if you like, they're not interested in dealing with PASIPA. To them, it's just something that happens in the city, and as long as they don't hear about it and there's no issues, they're not interested. They barely stop people from soliciting on the streets. They don't stop the Johns. They're just not interested in implementing that law. And there are other jurisdictions as well where we know, and in Alberta, there are a couple. I don't know the rest of the country, which is why we're going to come to this project. Worse, the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform, doesn't it sound like a wonderful trade union organization to improve the lives of sex workers? is challenging the constitutionality of the current laws in Ontario. So in 2014, in December, the then Conservative government implemented PACIPA. We have since had a Liberal government, and both the Liberal Party and NDPs do not approve the PACIPA Act. They are looking to change the act to the legalization, the German version. So the version that will give us mega brothels. In 2014, they said that they were going to review the law in 5 years. And I think COVID has actually halted that a little bit, but we all know that something's happening. This sex work challenge came about in March this year. But we're Soroptimists, so we have a proposed solution, the light bulb moment. Here it is. In order to lobby the government and to keep and maybe improve the Nordic model, we need to collect data. We need to know how many police agencies are implementing the Nordic model. Remember, we've got RCMP, provincial police and municipal police. So we need to know how many of these agencies are actually implementing the whole model. And we're suggesting, therefore, in order to do this, that the clubs in Eastern and Western Canada collect information through Freedom of Information to their local agencies in their area. Now, I'm not suggesting that every club goes off and studies the Nordic model. We have lots of talent in this organization. I gave this presentation to Eastern Canada Conference last week, and the talent that came out of there was astounding. We have somebody with a PhD in data collection and analysis. All sorts of people came forward and are offering their services. So I think we've got a lot of talent. There are a number of us that could put the questions together. We would actually provide the clubs with the appropriate questions. First of all, we need uniformity so that we can analyze the answers. But I've been studying this for 15 years. I think I can probably, with the help of a couple of other people, put most of these questions together to hand to the clubs. Governor Suzanne, with a Z, Suzanne, sorry about that, and President Esther Tira, President of SI Toronto, have agreed to head a committee to apply for a grant through the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. This grant is given for the research into addressing imagining Canada's futures. This grant, I think they're busy trying to apply for the grant, or putting their minds to it anyways, in the next couple of months. This funding will then be used to pay for somebody to analyze the data that's collected by the Freedom of Information requests. Of course, this was before we knew that we had somebody involved, although I still think it's a good idea for us to pay somebody, if we get this grant, to do this work or to assist in this work in some way. So what we would do is collect all this information, analyze it, and then we'd have a basis to go to the government and say, look, if you're going to look and see how this PACIPA has worked, and you're coming to the conclusion that it hasn't made any difference, the reason it hasn't made any difference is because it hasn't been implemented, and therefore we need to give it a try. We need to do this. So this, I would be very excited about, is a joint project that every club can participate in. The club's responsibility would be to send out the questions to Freedom of Information. There's a Freedom of Information link, or on every website, police website, any public website, they could fill it in. Their other responsibility would be to monitor when that comes in, and to maybe follow up with a request to say, look, it's been 2 months, we haven't heard anything, and then to send it to this committee that will collate and collect that money. Any questions?
Anyone who has questions, just pop them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Hi, Janneke. It's Linda Cunliffe, Surrey Delta. Just to let you know, I'd be very interested on behalf of our club, and I hate to put people on the spot, but I have two members that are at conference here that I think would be invaluable in our club to help collect whatever data we need to collect. And so I'm going to ask Darlene Jameson and Yvonne Hoganis if they would be joining me, because they both have a lot of background, as well as I do, on the whole issue of prostituted people and sex trafficking through our Servants Anonymous Society Surrey days. And so I think we could be very helpful in helping collect the data. And thank you so much for bringing this back. Like you said, you know, it's kind of like saying the same things over and over again after 20 years. A few things have changed, but a lot hasn't. And it's just getting more pervasive in our communities. And yes, we really do need to deal with this issue. Again, continue to do it, because it is violence against women. And yeah, so whatever you need, let me know, and I'll see if Darlene and Yvonne are still talking to me.
Janneke, it's Shari Grant here. I just wanted to say that I was surprised and dismayed to see that my union is very much in support of legalization and the whole sex work is work aspect of it. And I would be wondering, like, are you able to share the presentation that you gave, like the PowerPoint? There are just so many really good facts and bits of information in there that I'm hesitant on my own to try to rebut them, but your presentation was just so good with the list of facts of why sex work isn't work, that it would be really beneficial.
I'm passionate about this. You know, nothing's changed from that perspective. Yes, I will talk anyway. Well, for different reasons, but yeah, definitely. Sherry, one of the things I think I know which union you're in. David Eby.
Yes.
Was a so when PASIPA started, within a year or two of that, I don't have the exact years, but there was the challenge, the constitutional challenge in the Bedford case. There were 3 women in their 50s who said, no, we want to be prostituted women, and we have a right to be that. And David Eby at that time, it was before he went into politics, he was the lawyer for Pivot Society, and he actually had an intervener status at the Supreme Court of Canada, pro-legalization. That gives you a bit of an idea. We're on an uphill battle here. You know, when I listen to the Liberal Party and the NDP, I listened to Jasmeet Singh in one of the first, election ago it was, the first time, and he was asked that question out in Surrey, and his answer was pathetic. He clearly hadn't thought for a minute about it. And I'm not going down any. I'm not sort of really criticizing these leaders. You know, I like bits of most of them, but I'm appalled at the lack of attention that this topic is being given. It's a case of, oh well, it's always existed, nothing we can do, men will be men, boys will be boys, and off we go. And we really need to make that societal change. Yeah.
Hi, Janneke. It's Sherry.
Yeah.
I totally agree with what Linda said, that it's just, it's really, really sad that all these years later, we still have to be back on this topic and talking about it. I would be willing in Central Alberta to, you know, help find any information around our area. No problem there. It's really sad that even in our area, we used to have a nonprofit organization called Magdalene House, who had an actual house for trafficked people. And they had to close down because this community did not support them. There seemed to have been just a loss of interest that people just assumed was fine, but the issue still happens, and there isn't even an organization in our area anymore that can help educate people about it, which is really sad. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, I was really surprised to read all about or hear what you talked about in New Zealand, because like their prime minister is a woman that everybody celebrates for all the things that she does. Like it just kind of shocked me that she allows that to kind of happen in her country still. Like, do you have any information on whether she's even trying to change something like that, or does she just accept that?
I don't know, to be honest. The New Zealand thing in the community that I'm sort of connected to from internationally, they don't give out much information for some reason. We just kind of ignore them, to be honest. It is very sad, and it's a really, really good point. I mean, not that we ignore them, it's just that they're very hard to get information out of them, so it just doesn't go anywhere, if you know what I mean. So yes, I think that would be incredible to get a hold of Jacinta and say, hold on a second, look, this is what you're doing, you know. Yeah, I'm seeing some wonderful comments in the chats. I wish I could type and talk at the same time, but that's not possible.
Janneke, it's Lois Taylor here. I've got a question. I'm from North and West Vancouver. Could you kind of paint a picture of what you see the club's doing?
Okay, I mean, really, hopefully, relatively simple and hopefully spoon-fed. So we will put together a series of questions, and the questions will have to be well thought out. This is why I was really excited about the lady, and I can't remember her name now. Is it Joan from Eastern Canada, who's got a PhD in this kind of analytical stuff? So, sorry. Okay. So because the question has to be right in order to get the answer you want. But really what we need to do is just determine whether or not they are using or implementing PASIPA. We don't really need anything to tell us whether it's a good or bad thing. It's just, are you or aren't you? Do you have anyway, those questions that we'll put together, do you have a prostitution policy? Do you how many people do you arrest? Do you arrest Johns? Do you arrest women? Do you that kind of thing? So that questionnaire will be sent to every club. That somebody in the club will then fill out the Freedom of Information forms. North and West Vancouver, you've got 2 areas, of course. I'm also thinking that maybe the clubs can do more than one area if they, somewhere and they realize there isn't a club in the other areas. More information that we get, the better. Get that information back. Somebody's just got to monitor getting it back, because freedom of information, in my experience, people can forget about it. They're not as swift getting that kind of thing back to us. And then sending it to the central committee. That's it. And then we'll collate it.
I'm going to jump in. I see Dana and Sharon have their hands raised. So you guys fight it out between you who goes first.
Sharon's winning.
I'll ask a question. Good presentation, Janneke. Just 3 points. In the global stage, I continue to see this topic come up over and over again. Can you, I've got 3 points. Can you first of all use the word abolitionist and put it into some context? Because that's the word I frequently hear in this debate, is they're an abolitionist or they're not an abolitionist. So that was one thing. And the other debate I keep hearing as well, they don't agree with prostitution. They believe that all women are entitled to human rights, which is another debate I continue to hear. And then in Canada, we had a very interesting, one of our MPs that is now in office is very much on the position you're presenting. And they did a presentation before the election. It might have been 2 elections ago. I can't remember how many we've had now. And they were very much on the legalization, anti-legalization, and then I did some checking because I thought, oh, really? And I was told that they had, that the Liberals had put that away and they weren't proceeding, that had been overcome. It was in 3rd reading and then it got retracted or something. So is it enforcement we're after, or is it the anti thing altogether? So those are my 3 points.
Okay, I don't really, abolitionist I think is more sort of in the feminist topics, and that we, so I'm not going to go into that, because there's 3 waves of feminism and all that kind of stuff and so on. what we're trying to do, it's not a case of it's not a case of sort of saying, oh, this is a bad thing, in the sense of sex is a bad thing and you can't have it and all that kind of stuff. It's just that you can't have it where there's a power imbalance. So what we're asking for is that there be an implementation of this Nordic model, but it's more than just it's more than saying just charge the Johns and don't charge the women. The Nordic model, and this is the piece that I think the government has completely missed on, is the support that is given to the women. It takes a long time. There's a fellow, Simon Hagstrom. He's the one of the main police officers in Sweden who implemented it 20 years ago and is still doing it, and he's still educating people about it. And he says you need to build a rapport with the women that are in it, because they don't trust police at this point. They've always been charged by police. So it's a whole process of trying specifically to help the women get out of their situation is the focus. And what the legalization does is sort of says, oh, well, you know, your choice is to be in it. So there we go, off you go. You know, be happy and go forth. I confess I belong to more than one political party for the simple reason of getting information from them. And so I'm not going to tell you which ones, but 2 out of the 3. And it's not pretty. I think the Liberals are, especially because of this latest charter challenge that is coming up. I think it's done very strategically because the Liberals are putting it on their agenda to legalize it and to take the PACIPA away. That's what they're doing. Yeah.
So would the human rights aspect of it not mandate, or we could then lobby to mandate programs to help the women?
Well, that's part of the Nordic model, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is part of the whole model.
Yes, and I would actually like Sharon to, as part of the project, to find out what has happened to that $20 million and what support services are available to folks.
I looked into that, but my memory is a bit foggy because it was a 1.5 years ago. And to me, I remember it was like 23 million or something. And it was to do with, and I actually found the answer. And then I started to follow it up and then moved on. I never finished, but I'll try and pull my notes out and find out. I don't know that it had been, but that the plan was in place. And I heard that from an MP. So we shall see. And it was an MP on the not the reigning party. So.
All right. Thank you. Jana, you've been waiting patiently.
Hi, Janneke. Thank you for once again bringing this to the forefront of our brains. I think I can, you know, on behalf of SI Chilliwack, we will do whatever it takes. I'm, you know, we helped, you know, we're all in. I can say that we do have an organization in Chilliwack that is working, that specifically works with helping prostituted women. And we have recently in Heather's Hope Chest helped 2 of these women as they transition off of the street, right? So I feel like this is something that is extremely important in Chilliwack right now, right? I mean,
Yep.
Yes, and it just sort of, I feel bad. I kind of feel bad actually, because, you know, we helped these women and that was just it, right? Although we did say, is there anything else that we can do with you? But I think I'll take this to our club, and then maybe now we'll start reach out to that organization too. They might have information that we might like to know about. I'm pretty sure they're not getting any money from anybody to help, you know.
Yeah. Well,
so.
Yeah, the organizations that we're involved in here in Vancouver and Reed and Dignity and some other ones, none of them are getting the money.
Yeah.
And they're all looking to see where it is. Yeah.
There will be some discussion. There will be lots more opportunity for discussion here, but and really exciting comments in the chat. So keep those coming, everyone. There is a motion coming up, and at least one of our voting delegates needs to leave and shortly, and would like the opportunity to vote on it. So So, it was my job to make a response to Janneke, and I think you've kind of had your response from all of our sisters here. Wow. It's you said the other day that that you've been working 20 years in this and still get the same questions from some people, and really we've only scratched the surface today. But Western Canada region has such an incredible depth of knowledge, and you're probably the deepest well of knowledge and information and passion that we have here. So I'm just so grateful to have you here and restart this fight, because it is a fight. And in addition to our deep well of knowledge, we as Soroptimists have a network of clubs and a network of contacts. And in her talk, Janneke referenced "we" a few times, and I just want to let people know who that is. I think, I can't even remember. Janneke came forward with this idea. President Estatira from SI Toronto came forth. Those two women, myself, and Governor Rowe, Governor Jennifer, and Governor-elect Gertrude from Eastern Canada region, all came together and had a series of meetings and said, yeah, let's see if we can bring this forward. So both region boards have discussed the project, the notion, and voted to support and proceed. And I sent out a memo to all of our club presidents here to discuss with their executives. I know that Cindy mentioned Tri-Cities is forming an advocacy committee to get on board, and so the plan was to come here with to present a motion to the membership to proceed. And Janneke is not a voting delegate, so I'm going to call on Janneke to present that motion, and Emma is also going to put the motion on screen. So thank you, Janneke.
Just not to be confused with Janneke, and we're from the same club, so it gets quite it's quite funny, really. Janneke and Janneke. Janneke, I'm Janneke Ayers, from a president from SI North and West Vancouver, and I put forward the motion for Western Canada region to join with Eastern Canada region in a joint Canadian Soroptimist project to ascertain whether or not the police agencies in Canada implement the Nordic model and the PCEPA, which is the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. The Eastern and Western Canada region clubs will, number one, collect information using through the Freedom of Information, which is FOI, requests to the police agencies in their area regarding the implementation of the Nordic model and the PCEPA. And number two, share the information with the region. The two regions will jointly apply for funding for a grant through the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Number one, to assist in data collection and for analysis of the data that is collected by the FOI requests, the Freedom of Information requests. Number two, with the purpose that it will be used to present this information to the Canadian government in an effective manner to demonstrate the importance of the implementation of the PCEPA and the Nordic model.
Thank you, Janneke. And I would call for a seconder on this motion, and someone can just put your name in the chat if you like. All right, Cindy Paddington, thank you so much. So we have a motion, and now we have the opportunity to discuss this. And I see that Benita had her hand raised. So Benita, would you like to unmute yourself and take the floor?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, sorry, I had my microphone up. Thank you very much, and thanks so much for the presentation, and thank you to Cindy for seconding it. And I think this is, I've heard Janneke speak before, so I appreciate all the information that she brings. And I guess what I'll let you know is that in the Tri-City Club, there are two municipal officials that work directly with the budgets for the local RCMP here. So it's a data point. I guess I just wanted to say that I'm supportive of the project. I'm looking forward to us doing the advocacy. But I just feel that I need to speak a little bit about the fact that this model, the current model, is not acceptable to many of the political parties. Definitely the NDP party, although it might have been positioned a different way. They're not happy with the current legislation either, and they're interested in investigating it. So I don't have enough information right now on saying, yes, it needs to be the Nordic model, but it sure needs to be a safer place for women. It's heartbreaking, the amount of increase in sex trafficking and child exploitation in our very own communities. And thank you, Janneke, for talking about Duncan. I mean, you would never expect that the island would have exploitation. It's devastating. So in the jurisdiction where I am and where Nancy McCurrick is, we don't have enough resources to control the amount of child exploitation that's happening right now. So I'm really looking forward to digging deeper and diving into this. And thank you for the presentation again. I think I've heard you speak before at conference, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Benita. And I forgot two things. One is to remind everyone to say your name and your club. And also, before Angela says, where's the money coming from? I should say that our intent is for this, again, to be revenue neutral. So we will spend as much money as we can bring in, not through, not asking our own clubs to spend money on that. Who else would like to make a comment? For, against, ask a question? And really useful comments in the chat. And Kathy's asking who would be responsible for the grant money. Well, because our hope is that this will be a pan-Canadian project, it actually still has to be figured out who will look after the funds. And President Estatira in Toronto is part of Conestoga College there. And so she's hoping to apply as Soroptimists, but using the resources of Conestoga College to apply for this grant. So I think that, yeah, the full answer is not sure who's going to be responsible for the grant money, and we'll figure it out. If there are no other comments at this time, and Colleen Schmidt, our wonderful parliamentarian, is telling me that debate time is limited to 10 minutes, though that can be extended. And I haven't been keeping a timer, so I'm not sure where we're at. And if we were in person, right, I'd be looking around the room and saying, can I call the question? And I'd be getting nods or people putting up their hands.
Suzanne, it's Lois. Can I ask another question?
Yes, by all means.
Is there, what would be a timeline on this? Any idea?
Well, there is a sense of urgency, actually, because of this charter challenge. So I think that And the situation in Eastern Canada, they just had their conference, and perhaps I can put Governor Jennifer on the spot here to say a little bit there. They've had the information presented, and I think as a region they need to consider it a bit. However, as Statira is saying, you know, let's move forward with going after some grant money and see what we can do. Governor Jennifer, can I call on you to?
Yes, thanks, Governor Suzanne. We just had our conference, our second night of the conference on Thursday. We did ours in 2 evenings. And we have put the slide information out and the motion out to all clubs to consider at their June meeting, which is coming up shortly, and to have an answer back to us by late June. But as Esta Sarah has said, there's no reason we can't apply for the grant. We don't have to wait for that.
Thank you. And all right, other questions, comments, concerns, issues? It is a little bit of a leap of faith, you know, but by gosh, we've done it before. I mean, it's work that started in this region that culminated in PASIPA happening, and now I think it can be work in this region and Eastern Canada that can improve the situation for prostituted women and children in Canada. So I would like to call the question, unless there's any other hand up. Okay. Voting delegates. Please text your choice to the number that you've been given. And Emma, I'm going to wait for your notification.
I think that should be good to go.
Awesome. All right. And I do see, right, a question in the chat from Kathy Coughlin of SI Calgary about how quickly the grant money is distributed, and will that take a while? And I don't know, and we will have to find out. All right, we have 36 in favor, 0 against. Thank you so much. So the motion is carried. Wow.